Welcome to the Celtic Way, breaking news live. And if you've not heard already, the score from Denmark was Midtjylland 2, Celtic 1. Celtic once again are out of the Champions League at the first qualifying stage, second round, second leg qualifier, at 2-1 defeat in the MCH Arena in Denmark. Alison, I'm joined by Alison McConnell. Alison, just get your thoughts on that. It did go to extra time. They did take the lead with Callum McGregor's wonder strike, but that was probably one of the only high points and another bitterly disappointing night for Celtic in Europe.
I just think the defensive frailties that we've seen for so long were evident again. I thought it was a hugely frustrating night, largely because I think over the course of the two legs, I think Celtic will feel as though they created enough chances to have won the tie comfortably. I think you look at Midtjylland with the greatest of respect. I think Celtic should be beating them. I think there's a lot of questions to be asked in the aftermath about why Celtic perennially find themselves at this stage of the season every year unequipped for the magnitude of these games. I thought there was a nervousness again about the back line. I think just prior to Midtjylland leveling the game, there was a moment from Scott Bain when the ball seemed to just squirm through his arms, and you just feel the unnerving go through the team. You just get the sense of that defensive unease. To be fair, I thought the boy Dane Murray actually played all right. I thought he'd done very well considering. Same for Stephen Welsh, but with the greatest respect, there should be better options for the manager at this point. I think that's now the fourth consecutive unsuccessful Champions League qualification campaign, and I think if you're a club like Celtic and you have ambitions of seeing yourself in that kind of company and seeing yourself in that kind of company on a regular basis, then you have to do your homework way before there's a scrambling for players and getting organised in June and July. And I think it would be hard to pin the blame for this one on the manager. I think it will be a hugely frustrating night for him.
You touched upon it there, Alison. That's the fourth time in a row Celtic have crashed out in the Champions League qualifiers. Hate to say the phrase because it's not, but you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. That's basically it. And Celtic in the last decade of domestic dominance have qualified for the Champions League 4 out of 10.
Yeah, it gives you an indication of just how difficult. We know these games are difficult. We know the timing of them is difficult. We know we've not played competitive games. As a club, as a country, we're not up and running yet. So all Scottish clubs know you're going into them. You can be caught cold just because of when they come. But what you shouldn't be caught cold with now is the fact they are coming. I think you really have to have your eyes on it. We talked about this morning. But from January, whatever you're bringing in, maybe in the January window, you need to have an eye on what's coming in the summer. For Celtic to be going into these games with the squad selection that was available is pretty shocking when you consider what's at stake and the money that comes from progression deeper into the tournament. Now, even if had they got through this tie and gone out again against PSV in the next round, at least you would have been assured some level of European football. And I think over the piece, there were chances. I think you go back to near Beaton's red card in the first leg. I think if Celtic had kept 11 men on, I think the tie might have been put to bed at Celtic Park. I think you can go through it. I think even tonight, I think James Forrest came on, two very, very good chances, and then almost immediately you miss a chance at one end and they score at the other. But I think the very disappointing thing tonight was that there wasn't the personnel to look to on the bench and say, can you come on and influence it? Can you come on and change the game? And I felt as though there was a real lack of penetration, a lack of ideas, a lack of creativity just in that final half hour of the 90 minutes and in the final half hour of extra time.
I think it says it all, Alison, when the three best players, in my opinion, on the night were Anthony Ralston, Dane Murray and Stephen Welsh.
Yeah.
That takes out your whole middle attacking third and, your front third.
I thought Callum McGregor had a decent game, I have to say. I did, however, I just think Odsonne Edouard is gone in all but name. I think we saw so little from him. I think it seemed so half-hearted at times. A couple of opportunities where he rolled his man and got through and then was caught and tagged back. The Odsonne Edouard that we know, that we've seen last season, previous seasons, was way sharper than that. And I know, again, go back to the early stage of the season, but I think we could have expected more from him. I think we were right to expect more from him. I think Celtic were right to expect more from his colleagues, would have been right to expect more from him, but it was just lacklustre. There was a lethargy about his performance and a real lack of ideas just as the game started to run away from Celtic.
And I think you said it as well. There's a lack of personnel. We had nobody to bring on. Celtic had nobody to bring on for Odsonne Edouard, and you look to Haggerty and he's not going to turn the game for you. And it's just, as you've alluded to there, it's every year. They know when the Champions League qualifiers roll around. We spoke about it in an earlier briefing, and it's just, for some inexcusable reason, Celtic just fail to tool up, don't they? They fail to arm the man, with two exceptions being Martin O'Neill and Brendan Rodgers, where they gave those managers lots of cash to spend and players to bring in the summer in order to have a tilt at the Champions League. But my sympathy goes out to managers like Strachan, Ronnie Dyler, Neil Lennon to an extent, and certainly Ange Postecoglou, because they've just not armed the managers with the tools necessary to compete at the elite level. And if you want to be an elite level club, then preparation is everything. They've had 4 months to get a manager in the door. They didn't. Ange Postecoglou came in June the 10th, and he's going to have to carry some slack over this. But I totally agree with you. I absolve him of any blame, because he looks around that team and he says to himself, we spoke about it this morning, Celtic need about 7 players, don't they?
Yeah, I think there's a massive overhaul required. I think regardless of the result, you would have said that anyway. I think even had Celtic gone through tonight, I think you would still have expected big changes in terms of those coming in. And again, as we spoke about earlier, when you get to October and you contrast a starting lineup, I think it will look very, very different. But I think the frustrating thing was you had big players there tonight. I think you're right to expect more of them. I think Celtic should and could have had the beating of Midtjylland. I thought they were a fairly average side. I think you could expect Celtic to beat them, but I thought it was a very, very disappointing performance. There were chances and then it just seemed to fizzle out. I thought Celtic started the game really well in the first 15-20 minutes, but things just fizzled out. And after the goal, the same again. I think once Midtjylland levelled the tie, they always looked like the most likely to go on and score.
There was a foreboding sense of doom about it, wasn't there, when Midtjylland levelled so soon after James Forrest has a gilt-edged opportunity to make it 2-0 on the night. And, you know, at that level, these are chances that have to be taken. There is no getting away from that. You know, regardless if you've not played or whatever, these are chances you have to take.
Yeah, to be fair, I think I would have some sympathy for James Forrest. He obviously missed a chunk of last season. He's not played a lot of football. I know he went to the Euros, he didn't play a huge amount of football. He was barely on the pitch. I think even if they come 10-15 minutes after he's had a chance to find his touch and find his feet, I think you might see a different end product. I think you might see a goal going in. I think even if he's half a dozen games with a bit of momentum at his back, I think you might see them. I think it's difficult to have too much to be too critical of him, but I do think too that if you miss chances at this level, then you're exposed. Especially, I think, when you're so frail at the back. I think in some ways that attack has to be your best form of defence. That has to be the only way that you give yourself some kind of inoculation for what we're seeing just now, because there's a real nervousness about that back line, and if you were up against Celtic, you would be looking to really go for it and manipulate that weakness.
I mean, I think most people are saying, I mean, that this isn't on Ange, it's on those upstairs, isn't it? It's on the board collectively for failing to provide him with necessary funds to bring in players in the short period of time that he's been manager of the club. And I think that's what Ange was voicing his frustrations at. I think, we know deals take time, but they've just not given themselves a chance, have they, to compete in this qualifier against a bang average Danish side?
Yeah, I think we've all been privy to the hints that have come from Postecoglou about being frustrated at the length of time it's taken to get deals over the line and to get players in. And I just wonder too that whether it might have been an idea. Just it's been chat that the club clearly needs some kind of internal review and a different setup behind the scenes. Like there is a clear need for a head of recruitment, for a clear line within the club about who identifies players and how they're identified and how they are brought in. And I think that has to be seen as much as a priority as it is to bring in players, that you have someone whose exclusive sense of responsibility is to go and identify players for the manager, for the club. You would like to think that the manager has a final say on any arrival coming in, but he clearly needs a bit of help in that department.
I'm going to put a positive spin on this, Alison, if there's any chance that you can. I remember Gordon Strachan losing 5-0 to Artmedia Bratislava, and that was a catastrophe. And he won a League and Cup double by the following May. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Ange, but, these are the things that Celtic supporters will cling to. But at the moment, they can't see any positives moving forward. But the side will get better. There'll be bodies brought in. But it was for the here and now, as we've stressed, that we wanted those players to be brought in. And as we've said before, a month, 2 months, 3 months, this side will be different and probably vastly improved.
I think if memory serves me correct, Celtic were within a Craig Beattie header of going through and reversing that result. Actually, at Celtic Park, I thought they came very close. I remember it was quite a Leviathan effort in the second leg to try and pick up the pieces of it. You're right, they went on, they stabilised and they found their feet. The difference is, I don't know that there was quite the same level of overhaul required. I'm not sure that it was quite the same squad personnel, and in terms of the quality that was there that is now. I think there's masses of work to be done. I think it was quite clear this time last season, at the end of last season, that there was a significant amount and a body of work needing done. I think that remains. I think the problems that have been highlighted throughout a very chaotic campaign last year are still evident. I think clearly the goalkeeping issue is massive now. I think neither Vasilis Barkas nor Scott Bain have performed any kind of produced any kind of compelling argument to keep the gloves. I thought Scott Bain looked very nervous again tonight too. And it's clearly an issue, and the problem is you need a settled back four and you need a consistent goalkeeper, and I think that has to be an area of priority.
I actually thought Scott Bain unsettled the three youngsters who were having a top game, with his dithering about with his feet and giving them silly passes and just all-round error-strewn display, that it started to affect the guys playing in front of him, i.e. Anthony Ralston, Dane Murray and Stephen Welsh.
I thought he looked nervous. I have to say, I thought he looked nervous, and I think there's obviously been a clear directive from the manager about playing out from the back and trying to play a certain way. But I do think there are times when you can over-elaborate there, and when you do, you're in a very, very dangerous situation. And it happened at least twice that I can recall in the regulation 90 minutes where Celtic were almost caught. I think it's a very dangerous game to play.
Yeah, I mean, it was just another poor, weak display from Celtic all round in European competition, and it's getting to the stage where Celtic supporters don't actually look forward to European competition now, isn't it?
I think these games are always fraught. I don't know if anyone has ever enjoyed the qualifiers. I think there is always a tension to them. I think they're always difficult games. I think they always feel fairly precarious when it comes to trying to get through. But I think you're right to expect more. I think you're right to demand more from your club. I think if you can trust in the process and you can see that there's a level of preparation with these games in sight, I think you can be more forgiving of the vagaries that can happen at this point in the season. But I think the real frustration is the myopia that comes from the club in terms of just seeing the bigger picture and investing at a time that gives you optimum opportunity to go and maximise your chances of
this was a board that said if you buy your season tickets, that will help fund, Ange Postecoglou's splurge on new players. And I think everybody bought into that and bought into the new manager, and so far that's kind of failed to materialise. They've brought in players, but they've not been able to play in the Champions League qualifiers, and a lot of the fans thought they were buying for the here and now, invested in the here and now, and it turns out that it's the kind of same old for them, and I think that's going to be the bitterest pill for them to swallow, isn't it?
I have some sympathy in that regard. I think it can be difficult to get deals over the line quickly. I think preparations could have begun significantly further back. I would look to January. I also think maybe the manager could have come in earlier. I think the whole pursuit of bringing in a manager, I think we've all gone over it. We all know what happened. We've all been very critical of how the club conducted himself in the negotiations and the identification of Eddie Howe. But I think had a manager been sought and identified and in the club earlier, if the head of recruitment, how the club want to set themselves out, I think if that had been established some months ago, I think you have a fighting chance when it comes to these games. I think you're right, supporters have invested in the club. I think so far what you've seen is the board willing to spend that money. I think even last season, I think of all the criticisms, I don't think you could say they didn't spend money. I think they did. There's a whole separate argument to say whether or not it was money well spent, but I think they did invest in the squad. I think there has been investment, but it's just very frustrating between the timings of the games, the lack of preparation and the lack of urgency to get there. And also you have the COVID situation where you do bring in players and then you have to go through an isolation process still before you can join in with the squad. I think it all adds up to a chaotic start to the season.
It seems to be the self-inflicted nature of Celtic in the Champions League qualifiers that they just don't give themselves a fighting chance year on year, which is borne out by the results. And I think that's another thing that the supporters can't get their head around, that you have to give yourself every chance, but year upon year it doesn't seem to materialise, does it? There's always fresh optimism at the start of a season, and as you say, they come around early. Everybody knows when the qualifiers come around, but they always go in underprepared and under-equipped.
I think the frustration is it's seen as a repeated failure. Frustration is it seemed to be doing the same thing and expecting a different result every summer. I think what you really want to be going into the qualifiers with is a squad that you trust, a squad that you feel confident of being able to get you there. And I think that can come if you finish the season strongly, if you're maybe just tweaking the squad, if you're maybe just having to add one or two and you're beginning from a point of stability. I think it gets significantly harder. I think it was always going to be a tough ask this season, given the massive surgery that is required on the squad. But I think what the frustration will be among supporters is it's just seen as now a perennial failure of the same scenario all the time.
We could pour over this for time and perpetual motion, Alison. It's just another one on the list, isn't it, of European failures, and which Celtic have to take on the chin. But they're taking a lot of blows in the chin in the years going by, aren't they? Still there, yes?
Yeah, sorry, I think we just cut out for a second there. I think it's very, very difficult. And the problem now is that you have your opening game of the season at a traditionally difficult venue. You're playing catch up almost before a ball is kicked. Obviously, you're playing on Saturday evening. I think it's a apart from the fact that obviously you've played a full 120 minutes. I think that 120 minutes never quite feels the same if you've won the tie. It leaves you with a bit of a spring in your step. I think it's very different when you're coming off the back of a result like that. I think there's a hangover. I think we've seen it in seasons before. I think there's always a real lethargy about the squad and the club when you fail to make the Champions League or you fail to progress through these qualifiers. I think it does take a bit of time to process that and to come to terms with it. But the issue now is that there's not a lot of time going into the start of a league campaign.
Alison, thanks for your time. That's been the Celtic Way Breaking News Live. And for anybody that doesn't know, Celtic crashed out of the Champions League qualifiers again, losing 2-1 to Midtjylland, 3-2 on aggregate. Thanks very much for watching.